All right, guys, today I'm going to teach you about when to snap and when to retreat. Now, this is mostly about when to snap because it's pretty obvious when to retreat most of the time, but snapping is a big part of the game. It's a big part of ranking up, and everybody always asks me what's my best advice for ranking up. You'll hear me and pretty much every other streamer say the same thing, which is you gotta know when to snap and you gotta know when to retreat. So firstly, you want to snap if you have a very good hand, if you have a very good setup or hand, and you want to do it pretty early on. Now, snapping on turn 1, that's probably a little risky because your opponent could also have a good hand, or there could be a location that comes up on turn 1, 2, or 3 that actually just messes you up. So snapping around that turn 2 or 3 kind of spot is usually a pretty good thing to do. You want to really lock your opponent in for that cube before they see that you're making a powerful play. And this leads me into my next tip about snapping, which is snapping before your opponent sees a powerful play that you're about to make. So if you're going to make a play that's going to swing the game in your direction pretty hard, or you know that maybe your opponent has Bucky Barnes on the field and you're about to play armor to block them from destroying it, that's pretty powerful, and you want to snap before your opponent gets to see that. So like I said before, when you have a good hand, you usually snap pretty early on, but it's also the same thing with when a location or when any kind of randomness happens in your favor. If the randomness does put you in a pretty good spot, or at least to your knowledge, then it is good to snap pretty early on to lock your opponent in. And you basically, by snapping this early and having them, even if they do retreat, that's still good for you. You still get the cube. Basically, the big part about this is not allowing your opponent to stay in and see what their next cards are that they're going to draw. So you want to get them out before they have the chance to see if they do draw that one missing piece or what happens with more randomness in the game. You want to make them pay to stay. So the next thing I'm going to tackle here is bluffing. There are not so many times that you should bluff in Marvel Snap with snaps, but here are the times where you should. The main time that you should bluff snap is when you're in a winning position, but you have a bad follow-up. So if I am very ahead on board, and my hand is really weak, but my opponent doesn't know that, I want to snap. I want to get them out of the game before I get forced to play these really weak cards in my hand. The only other time really that you should bluff is when you actually don't have anything, but you could bluff it so that you could really like tell your opponent that yes, I have it, wink wink, but in reality you don't. But just be wary that it is pretty risky to do a bluff like that. And that is because if your opponent is ahead, they're usually going to feel pretty safe. Here's actually a clip of me bluffing my opponent out because they had a full location here, and I made it seem like I had enough to win the location, but in reality, I really did not. I go to 15, I get +6. I can't even win this, dude. I can't even win this. Just bluff him? Yeah, I could actually bluff. That's true. I could actually bluff that I have Shang-Chi. That's a good idea. Alright. It's the same thing either way. If he's retreating, if he... So the last thing that I want to cover with snapping is that you should almost never snap on the last turn. The reason for this is, as you know, on the last turn, the stakes get doubled. So if we're playing for 2 cubes, then it's going to be 4 cubes on the finale if we both lock in. Now, in this spot, you're usually not bluffing a snap on the last turn because that's a lot of cubes to double down on. It just really makes it so your opponent is probably going to leave most of the time. So, I mean, I can leave for 2 cubes or I can play it out for 6 cubes. And it seems like you're confident, so I think I'll leave. But if you got that snap in before the last turn, then I would have been locked in for at least 4 cubes. I hope I did a good job of explaining that. But there are a couple times that you actually can snap on the last turn. I think the only times that it's acceptable to snap on the last turn are if you are bluffing or if you appear very weak to your opponent, but you have a very strong play. So what I mean by that is if the board state just looks like I'm losing pretty badly or decently badly, then my opponent is going to stay in most of the time, even if I snap. And they might even think it's a bluff snap. So if you are appearing very weak, but you have a very strong follow-up that you like know is going to win the game because snapping on the last turn is risky, if you don't have a really strong play, then I do recommend snapping on the last turn because your opponent shouldn't leave that often, and you can totally just get some extra cubes in there. Now, as far as when to retreat, I mean, it's basically whenever you're losing. You want to minimize the amount of cubes that you're losing, and you want to maximize the amount of cubes that you're winning. So if something really bad happens to you really early on in the game, it feels really bad to just leave when your opponent snaps on you, but you're only losing 1 cube, and yes, the randomness did not go in your favor, but that just means that next game it totally might. It is a really integral part of climbing in this game to know when to fold it, and to know when to just back out for that 1 cube and just go into the next game. And to the same volition as with the snapping, if your opponent snaps you on the last turn, then usually you want to retreat, unless you have a really strong play as well. But yeah, and that's pretty much all I got. I mean, there's probably other circumstances where you can bluff more easily, or there's many different things that could happen in this game, but snapping is really interesting, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of people love this game, including myself. So definitely take full advantage of that. I hope my tips helped out a little bit. Snapping is such a big part to ranking up, so I wish you the best of luck with it. Let me know if you have any questions down below, and thank you for watching.